EVA presentation, July 2017, Dirty Nature, Aesthetics and Ecology in Contemporary Art and Animation, Exploring the Anthropocene, by Joseph Norman. My practice-led PhD research focuses on using art and animation to explore the human connection with nature and the impact of human activity on nature. I am interested in embracing the context of dirt as a concept that spans notions of the surface of the planet along with the infiltration of nature by industrial pollution. The work looks at the concept of nature as a historical and cultural construct in the context of the Anthropocene, the geological era defined by human impact on the environment. Key artists whose work I am exploring include Björk's Biophilia. Björk made this work to be released as an app and also through the music album and an extensive tour involving complex sound and visual experiences. The work aims to merge science and creating music in connecting people with nature. Björk recounts how, as a child, she walked through harsh winter conditions and sang in response to rain and wind. She feels a blurring of creating music with nature and weather. Björk approaches the body as an organic interface, modulating with the changing environment. Her previous work shows a preoccupation with the human-nature connection, often explored through folk-tale-infused performances and songs. Her approach moves fluidly between micro and macrocosmic landscapes. The song Moon uses a playable musical instrument which operates as a visualization of the female menstrual cycle, and each note change affects the moon's phase. Musically echoing folk songs and making paganistic connections between humans and the natural environment, the work explores the mutual infiltration of the human body and the cosmos. In her stage show, Björk explores a grotesque carnivalesque use of animal masks and costumes, and the theme of connection between all life forms is constant. My creative work has been informed by Björk's fusing of folkloric theatre with science content, using masks and transformation of identity in her costumes. In addition, her symbolic treatment of organisms, for instance in Virus, in which a virus mutates and overwhelms a cell, has a parallel with the emotional impact of falling in love. Separately, in the film Velocity by independent animator Karolina Gluciek, I have explored the use of transformation through the mutation of scribble effects, leading to transformation between alternate imagery. The film focuses on how velocity affects visuals, and the use of constant overall boiling line leads to a sense of image in constant flux and reinvention. This also lets the artist find metonymic links between thousands of blades of grass blowing and ground pavement textures. The emphasis is on the repetitive whole, multiple objects or marks operating en masse. The composition switches between abstract multiples and crowds in a void landscape to a more conventional scene depicting a man within an office. Texture is used as a linking device, unifying the surface and filling the void. Scribble drawing depicting animal motion connects with the overarching focus on mark making, and this approach to multiples allows for huge crowds, metonymically connecting back to the earlier blades of grass, to look out for an empty space. The theme of mass-produced entities continues through a field of factories, with smoke billowing, viewed from the train. The film ends with an accelerated flux between blades of grass, humans, chimneys, trees, culminating in a final realization of the passing of a landscape memory. In a separate film, Out of Sight, Gluciek uses repetitive scribble and erasure marks to explore a sense of memory of movement at both an animal and microscopic level. This leads to a gradual dissolution of recognizable imagery and a sense of transformation from animal to memory of its motion across the screen. At times, the screen is filled by large-scale microscopic imagery, switching back to full-body shots of animals flying or running. Gluciek's work is relevant to my project as she utilizes loose automatic drawing processes as a means of dissolving form between identifiable imagery. Her interest in using auratic mark making, in the sense described by Walter Benjamin, as a means of capturing a fleeting memory juxtaposes sensory animal experience with industrialised commodified processes. This informs my approach to the infiltration of nature by pollution and commodification, and also to the exploration of multiple transformations between characters and landscape. Separately, in the animated music video Center, filmmaker Tanya Tagak uses human characters in a landscape which appear to be planted within the environment, like organisms or plants. The character suffers from environmental pollution, and their body responds like a withered plant trying to grow again. The anthropomorphic theme is extended through giving limbs to the Earth planet, and the Earth is also visualized as an abstracted symbol comprising squirming organisms. The planet is gouged out with orifices, which also operate as wounds, leaking bodily substance and life force. There is a repeating transformation from a skull into a planet into a creature, using traditional cartoon mutations similar to Looney Tunes. Due to the flat stylization and somewhat psychedelic colour approach, the ongoing effect is one of microscopic organisms operating as a cosmos with Mother Earth at the centre. Ravens are used to frame an anthropomorphic human character with multiple mouths and eyes, a shamanic presence embodying the fundamental connection between humans and animals. The artist deploys an overarching and unifying process of flux between a character as a singular entity and microscopic organisms, developed through mutation between elements, for instance a head becomes a planet, and through organic textures overlaid with character faces. The landscape continues to mutate and comprises microscopic forms mobilized within a more mainstream landscape composition. Tagak's work has influenced my creative development through its exploration of transformation between anthropomorphic elements. In parallel with visual arts, I have conducted research into radical eco-poetry in connection with the Anthropocene. Specifically, I have looked at a poem by Irish poet Paula Meehan, who wrote The Death of a Field. This poem deals with the impact of urban development and the disappearance of nature through loss of collective memory. The poem opens with the announcement of impending death of a field, through it being categorised as a building site for a new housing development. The identity of the field disappears through the loss of memory of its flora and fauna, as well as through the loss of sensory memory of having walked through the field. Human activity, as increasing urbanisation, is counted against innocent nature. The end of nature is at once the start of urban sprawl. In a powerfully visual section of the poem, individual plants in the field are replaced one by commercial cleaning products, whose names and commercially vibrant labels signify the transition from nature to commodity fetishism. The end of dandelion is the start of flash. The end of eyebright is the start of fairy. The poem ends with the narrator vowing to walk one more time in nature and experience underfoot the field before it is gone forever, lost to an architect's screen, thus to possess nature and in turn be possessed by it one last time. In exploring poetry, I have researched alternative approaches using a range of narrative structures in storytelling. Meehan's work encourages my exploration of how commodities build a new type of landscape. In addition, through dwelling on the loss of collective memory of nature, I've been led to examine the sense of empathy people may experience in landscapes, in contrast with the sterility of factory-produced objects. Separately, animator Kirsten Lepore, in her 11-minute stop-motion animated film Move Mountain, makes a highly organic landscape of anthropomorphic plants and hills. A character wanders through this landscape and stops to eat wild fruit. Bitten by an insect, the character becomes sick, and the landscape starts to share their fevered symptoms. They are innately drawn to the top of a mountain, where they experience connection with an array of strange animal and supernatural creatures. The work is particularly relevant to my research in its wildly creative approach to the landscape as body, and in exploring the empathic interconnection between humans and nature. The natural world is represented as an antidote to sickness, and the character is healed partly through becoming connected with other forms of life. On climbing the mountain, the character gets out of breath, and the plants shudder with heavy breathing in sharing the need for breath. Separately, I have researched the stop-motion animation processes in the work of Alison Shulnick. In the 8.5-minute stop-motion animated film, Shulnick builds a world of fantastical transforming creatures and plants and faces human characters. who merge with flowers, acquiring petal faces that transform hypnotically. Other petals and stems engage in seductive dances. The landscape speaks through anthropomorphic elements, and the technique of plasticine transformation builds a sense of mutual dissolution and constant becoming between plants, humans, and creatures. Anthropomorphic landscapes are a key aspect in the novels of François Rabelais. In his text, Rabelais and His World, author Mikhail Bakhtin describes how the natural world is represented as anthropocentric, with architecture becoming a body part, in one instance a phallus whose shadow is capable of impregnating women. The whole landscape is infused with anthropomorphic elements, with walls being made from human genitals and an overarching focus on bodily functions such as eating, defecation and sex. The text focuses on the origins of the grotesque lying in folkloric tradition, and how, in Rabelais' work, an object can outgrow itself and infuse with another object. In Rabelais' grotesque world of constant becoming, an object transgresses its quantitative and qualitative limits, merging object with phenomena, and this in marked distinction to the art and literature of that period. In the traditions of medieval folk culture and grotesque realism, concerning the human face, the nose and mouth play the most important roles, as they extrude from the main body, fusing with the world and disrupting its confines, infiltrating and invading its boundaries. For Rabelais, a grotesque body is a body that, in the act of flux and constant becoming, never completed. It creates another body. The body is engaged in swallowing the world and also being swallowed by that world. The body creates a second body of bowels and phallus, which can separate from the main body and operate independently, as can the nose. This is followed by the mouth and anus. All these body parts share characteristics within them. The body and the world fuse within. This fusion through bodily function has informed my development of an anthropomorphic landscape, where dirt and decay, along with animal urination, defecation and feeding, form the fundamental connection of people with nature. In Caroline Schauman and Heather Sullivan's 2011 text, Dirty Nature, the authors contrast natural and built environments, encompassing the traditional aesthetic of green fields and sunsets with industrial farmlands and urban grit. Nature is a composite of material interactions on many scales, including bodies, species and energy politics. The text queries how we can conceive of nature today, and also questions how our attitude to dirt, as a cultural construct, affects our understanding of the relationship between humans and nature. Nature is examined in terms of the effect of the Anthropocene, with mass extinctions, pollution, deforestation. It has become impossible to distinguish altered from unaltered, so wild nature represents a fantasy construct. Neither pure nature nor pure culture exist in isolation. They contaminate one another. The concept of dirt nature includes the processes of consumption and reproduction of all living organisms, and also their interactions with industrial products. My developing animated work has been informed by this interesting and stimulating text through staging a contrast between notions of what constitutes dirt, industrial pollution or animal defecation. In addition, rot and decay lead to the beauty of wild nature through regeneration and growth. Gilles Deleuze's concept of the rhizome as a multi-branching, anti-linear signifying system has led me to explore the transformation between elements of characters and landscape elements, which possess a mutable nature. A character's head becomes a dandelion head, and a swarm of flies operate as stars in the sky. I am currently developing a short animated film exploring the theme of nature and the Anthropocene. The film is in the late stages of pre-visualization and storyboarding. The narrative uses transformation between human and animal body and organism and character and landscape elements, and explores a microscopic connection between the planet and subjective experience. Plants and landscape operate anthropomorphically, breathing in conjunction with human and animal characters. In relation to the German expressionist concept of landscape as a dramaturgic element, the landscape functions as character, becoming sick through pollution and acquiring expressive character traits. The human protagonist experiences deep empathy with other animals and organisms, and ultimately the landscape itself. Through inhaling the scent of plants in a meadow and eating the seeds, she becomes attuned to the web of connection between all living things, but also the infiltration of that web by human industrial activity. The concepts of dirt and nature are explored as cultural constructs, embodying the qualities of wild disorder and chaos. These are contrasted with industrial dirt and fossil fuel pollution, exerting an irreversible impact on Mother Nature. The work deliberately stages a juxtaposition of pollution with folkloric reading of nature, and aims to explore contemporary politically charged issues against the backdrop of folk tales as a historical means of interpreting the human connection with nature. Thank you.